Now, some advertisements really try to entice you and to draw you in. They lure you with promises of, you're going to look better, feel better, you're going to get more wealthy, things are going to work better for you if you just use our particular product, if you sign up for this particular class. Well, I want to show you a poster that is an artist's rendition of an ad that was run in, I've heard it was in the London Times. It's a little kind of sketchy if you try and trace down the history of this, but apparently it was an ad, something similar to this that ran, okay? Now, you see there at the top, actually, let's back up to the slide just before that, Jerry, okay? I want to see the one of the title of this, and it says, Men Wanted for Hazardous Journey. When you see that poster, that's not really going to draw you in very much, right? This advertisement, I want to be a part of a hazardous journey. Well, look at the specifics that they asked for then after that. Here's what we're offering you. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return is doubtful, but honor and recognition in case of success is guaranteed. How many of you would want to sign up for something like that? Absolutely not. But apparently, this was an ad that was run by Ernest Shackleton. Now, if you don't know the name Ernest Shackleton, let me give you a little bit of background on him. Ernest Shackleton was part of an expedition in 1901 to the South Pole, but it was an expedition that failed. Now, he was not the one leading the expedition, but then he made another attempt in 1907. Now, unfortunately for him, he still pulled up short of making it to the South Pole. And that honor was taken from him by a man named Roald Amundsen, who reached the South Pole prior to him. But Shackleton was not willing to give up. He said he was going to try something even greater, and that was not just reaching the South Pole, but traversing the continent of Antarctica via the South Pole. So actually go right through the middle of the continent and go ahead and go all the way across. And he attempted that, I believe it was in 1914. Now, the reason I share this with you is because of the fact that people lined up to be a part of this expedition. In spite of that promise of the bitter cold and the terrible conditions and the fact that, it's even doubtful that we're going to come back alive, people still lined up to be a part of it. And you know what? In spite of being stranded for days, and if you ever want to read the story of this, his ship was called the Endurance. It got locked in the ice. They had to traverse out of the continent, had to sail without any sort of navigational equipment, using dead reckoning to try and reach an island. And he lost no members of his crew. It's a wonderful story of survival. He wanted a certain kind of man for that expedition. He didn't want sissy kind of guys. He wanted tough guys who were not afraid of an expedition that promised cold and hardship and deprivation. He wanted men's men to be a part of this. He wanted tough people. And this morning, what we're going to see is we're going to go through in Daniel chapter 11 a depiction of history and also a prediction of the future. And what is needed to traverse times like these is people who have a certain something inside of them. A certain quality that needs to be present if you are going to navigate that kind of period, that kind of difficulty. And I think this is going to make sense as we get into it a little bit, but I got to tell you, this morning is going to be different than most messages in some ways because of the fact that it's going to deal a lot with history. Now, we're not going to read every verse in the chapter. Okay, it's 45 verses long, and a lot of it is going to be like you're going to say, scratching your head and saying, what? But I want to give you a flavor for it, okay, as we get in and we see this bit of history. Now, I want to back up into chapter 10 of Daniel. We've been working our way through Daniel. The first part of it is historical. The second part is primarily prophecy. And as we get to chapter 10, verse 14, this is in the time that an angel came to visit Daniel. And in 10 verse 14, the angel says, Now I have come to give you an understanding of what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision pertains to the days yet future. This is about the Jewish people, Daniel, and this is what is going to happen future. Now, we are still, way, way future from Daniel now. Okay, so some of what we are going to read, though it was all predictive for Daniel, it was all from the future and from Daniel's perspective, some of what we are going to read is actually historical for our perspective because it has already happened. All right, now let's back up, and I want to give you a running start into chapter 11 by starting in chapter 10, verse 20. Then he, this is the angel, said, "Do you understand why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. So I am going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of the truth. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him." Now, when you see prince here, this is talking about an angelic figure. Okay, and an angel that was over a certain territory, over a certain people group. So Michael was given charge over the Jewish people. There was a prince or angel, really a demon, over Persia. There was one over Greece, and that was doing battle with these heavenly angelic figures. And last week, we looked at how God pulled back the curtain for Daniel so he could see what was going on spiritually behind the scenes that was having an effect here on earth. And we also learned how it is that our prayers can have an effect, not only in what's going on that side of the curtain, but what's going on our side. In the spiritual realm and in the physical realm that we see, our prayers have power. All that we see in Daniel chapters 10, 11, and 12 is all one big scene that is a response to Daniel's prayer. Daniel was a person that God honored, and he responded when Daniel prayed. Now, last week, the curtain was pulled back, but we didn't actually see, well, what's the message that this angel is bringing? We saw the angel came, and he talked about the spiritual battle, but this week we actually get to see what is the message that was being delivered. Now, let's go ahead and look now at verse 2. "And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a fourth will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece." Now, what we're going to see is that there's a lot of kings that are going to come up that we're going to see in this passage. Daniel is in the Persian Empire right now. He was captured by Babylon. Babylon was conquered by Persia. And so he's under one ruler, and it says there's going to be more that are going to arise. The last one is going to be very powerful, and that last ruler of Persia is going to wage war against Greece. Okay? Now, let's go to see what happens now in that as a result of that battle, verses 3 and 4. "And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded. For his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others beside him." This king here, we know from history, is Alexander the Great. If you go through this chapter, king, 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 you can line it right up from the history books. And all this was said ahead of time by the Lord as he predicted. Alexander the Great conquered the known world in a very short span of years. But then he died unexpectedly in his early 30s, and he left no heir. And so his generals competed and basically divided up that great empire of Alexander the Great into 4 different empires. This morning, we are going to look at 2 of those empires. Just 2, because those are the ones that are dealt with here. Now, we're going to see that there are, it's going to refer to the Southern Empire and the Northern Empire. The Southern Empire was General Ptolemy who took over this, okay? P-T-O-L, however you spell that, okay? Ptolemy. He's the one that took over the Southern Empire, which included Egypt. There was a man by the name of Seleucid, one of the generals, who took over the Northern Empire, which included like Syria and some parts, I think, up in Asia. Okay, those are the 2 that we're going to hear about. Now, to give you a flavor of what this sounds like, let's go ahead and look at verses 5 through 9. "Then the king of the south will grow strong, along with one of his princes, who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion, and his dominion will be a great dominion indeed. After some years, he will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. But she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up, along with those who brought her in, and the ones who sired her, as well as he who supported her in those times. But one of the descendants of her line will arise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he will deal with them and display great strength. Also their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold he will take into captivity to Egypt. And he on his part will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years. Then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but he will return to his own land." Now, I'm stopping there. This gives us a flavor of what this chapter sounds like. Most of these people are not named. They're just referred to as the king of the north, the king of the south. There's this battle that's going on. We're not going to continue reading most of this because of the fact that it's very confusing. Now, if you are interested and you want to be like a serious student of this, I'll point you to some resources that explain who all these kings are and where the battles happened and all of this. But the reason that this is in here is because God has told Daniel, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to your people. Well, his people aren't in the southern kingdom. They're not in the northern kingdom. But you know what's right in between the northern and southern kingdom? Israel. Israel was a battleground between these forces of the north and these forces of the south. And so what was going to happen to God's people was largely determined by what was happening in these two kingdoms. As they battled, they would come into Jerusalem, they would take things from Jerusalem, they battle around, back and forth. Israel changed hands between the kingdoms, I believe. And so why is God sharing all this? I want you to know, Daniel, what your people are going to endure. Now, there is a lot of selfishness, a lot of violence with these human rulers. It reads really like if you imagine that the writers of history books got together with the screenwriters of soap operas and decided they were going to come up with one work together. There is betrayal and backstabbing and marriage alliances and infidelity and assassinations, all of those things that are a part of this history. Now, we're going to zero in, though, on two rulers that are mentioned a little bit later in the chapter. So if you jump now to verse 21, okay? Verse 21, we're going to be introduced to a person who is referred to as despicable. Despicable, okay? In his place, a despicable person will arise on whom the honor of kingship has not been conferred. And he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue. The overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant. After an alliance is made with him, he will practice deception, and he will go up and gain power with a small force of people. In a time of tranquility, he will enter the richest parts of the realm, and he will accomplish what his fathers never did, nor his ancestors. He will distribute plunder, booty, and possessions among them, and he will devise his schemes against strongholds, but only for a time. This refers to a person named Antiochus. Now, there's a lot of Antiochus guys in this history. This is Antiochus the Fourth. He was the one that was called Antiochus Epiphanes. He was called the madman by the Jews. And so he was a person who seized the kingdom by intrigue, murder. He was sneaky. And verse 24 summarized there his success. But did you notice that his success was not permanent? It said that only for a time was he going to have the success. All right? Let's look now, starting in verse 25. He will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south with a large army, so that the king of the south will mobilize an extremely large and mighty army for war, but he will not stand, for schemes will be devised against him. Those who eat his choice food will destroy him, and his army will overflow, but many will fall down slain. As for both kings, their hearts will be intent on evil, and they will speak lies to each other at the same table. But it will not succeed, for the end is still to come at the appointed time. Then he will return to his land with much plunder, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant, and he will take action and then return to his own land. At the appointed time, he will return and come into the south, but this last time, will not turn out the way it did before. For ships of Kittim will come against him. Therefore, he will be disheartened. I'm going to pause right there in the middle of the verse, because this shows that Antiochus did not have just unmitigated success. He ran into some problems. He decided that he was going to attack the southern kingdom, the Egyptian kingdom. So he attacks, but this time that southern kingdom did not fight against him alone. They recruited an ally, Rome. And Rome came, and with the navy, these ships of Kittim, came, and they were able to defeat Antiochus. And as they met on the beach, after this battle had ended, you've got Antiochus, and you've got the general or leader from the other side. And of course, Antiochus was beaten, so it's time to figure out terms of surrender. You need to surrender, Antiochus. You need to get out of here and go back home. And so what he did, this opposing commander, took and drew a line around Antiochus in the sand on the beach and said, you can't leave that circle until you make your decision. He put him on the spot. Not only did he force him into a decision, it was, I'm sure, very humiliating. Well, Antiochus, he realized he couldn't win, So he had to go back home. He had to go back up north. But he was ticked. He had been humiliated. He had been defeated. He had a lot of seething anger inside of him, and he couldn't take that anger out on this other general or on his army because it was too big. So on his way home, he decided he was going to take out his anger on somebody else. So where did he have to pass through on his way home? Israel. Israel became the brunt of Antiochus' wrath on his way back. So now let's pick it up now in the second half of verse 30. Okay, it says he became disheartened, and he will return and become enraged at the holy covenant and take action. So he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice. And they will set up the abomination of desolation. Now we know from history, I think it's from the historian Josephus, that what happened when he came through, they attacked Jerusalem, they killed 80,000 Jews in Jerusalem, and then they took tens of thousands more and enslaved them, either taking them for their own slaves or selling them as slaves. It was a horrific time to be a Jew in Jerusalem as they came through. But he was not content, Antiochus wasn't, to just come through and conquer people. He wanted to put himself against their religion as well, the core of what it means to be a Jew. So it says that he desecrated the sanctuary there. Okay, he took and he burned some of the Torah scrolls, their scripture scrolls. He outlawed the practice of the Jewish religion. You can't circumcise your baby boys anymore. You can't offer your regular sacrifices. As a matter of fact, he did the abomination that causes desolation. He took a statue of Zeus and set it up in the temple of God. And then, to add insult to injury, he sacrificed a pig, an unclean animal, on the Jewish altar. He totally just smeared the Jews across the pavement. That's the way he treated them on the way back. So why is Daniel having all this revealed? Daniel, things are going to get worse before they get better. You need to know what is going to happen to your people. Daniel, you have been praying for your people. Understand, it is going to get worse. Bad times are going to come. But in bad times, there is still a glimmer of hope. Okay, let's go ahead and finish now and read. We're going to start in verse 32 and read through 35. By smooth words, he, Antiochus, will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. They will fall, yet by the sword and by flame and by captivity and plunder for many days. Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy. Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. Did you see those two groups of people in there who are going to, in a time of adversity, in a time of terror and suffering? There's not two groups of people. There's probably more one group of people, but they're described in two different ways. It says there that they are going to be those who know their God and those who have insight. And what are they going to do? They are going to display strength, and they are going to take action. In times of distress, God's people rise up. Not all of them. Some of them are recruited by this terrible figure. You know what? It's a lot harder to be a Jew right now. It's a lot harder to follow God. So it's going to be easier for me if I just capitulate, if I just give in. I'm just going to go along with the ruling power here and not stand up for what I believe in, because I might lose my property, I might suffer, I might lose my life. So I'm just going to go along, joining in hypocrisy, turning to wickedness. He's going to entice them to his side. But those who will not be enticed, he's going to put the hammer down on them. Many are going to die. And how is it they're going to die? It says by the sword, flame, captivity, plunder. You are going to suffer if you are going to stand. But in that time, there were some people who decided to stand. This is probably a reference to the Maccabees. There's a guy named Judas Maccabeus, and he and some of his family and others started an armed revolt that eventually, over time, was able to drive out Antiochus' forces and to reclaim the temple and rededicate the temple for the worship of Yahweh. In times of distress, God is calling people to stand up, to step up, and to say, I'm not going to put up with it. I'm not going to take this sitting down. I'm going to stand, I'm going to speak, and I'm going to fight. I'm going to do something about this. Now, this is all history. But there's a transition that takes place when you get to verse 36. Now, it just says the king. Okay, when you start verse 36, it just talks about the king. It doesn't tell you that you have actually changed kings. As you go through this chapter, it just talks about the king of the north, the king of the south, this king. But sometimes the dynasty has continued on from father to son and on and so forth. Okay, so I want you to pay attention as we read this and see, do you think that this is the same king? This is Antiochus, or is this someone else? As we get into verse 36. Okay? Then the king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers, or for the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god, for he will magnify himself above them all. But instead he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasures. He will take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will give great honor to those who acknowledge him, and he will cause them to rule over the many and will parcel out land for a price. When you look at this, this seems very similar to Antiochus. But remember how Antiochus set up the statue of Zeus? Here it says he's not going to have regard for other gods. He's going to make himself like a god. He's going to want to be worshiped and honored as such. It seems that Antiochus foreshadows something else. Now, we all know what a movie trailer is, right? Okay, it could be 30 seconds, 60 seconds, a couple minutes. Anytime that you go to watch a movie in the theater, you know that you're going to have to endure about 15 minutes of movie trailers, right, before the actual feature film comes up. A trailer is a small sampling of what is to come. Here, it seems that Antiochus is really like a trailer, pointing towards a full-fledged movie that is going to unfold at a later time, a time that has not even happened as of now when we stand here. Then there is going to arise another world ruler in the same pattern as Antiochus, one who is going to want to magnify himself and be great, and who is going to persecute the people of God in his quest for power. This is a reference, it seems, to the Antichrist. Okay, that's a person who is revealed to us in the New Testament, called the son of lawlessness. There's different terms that are used for him, but a person who is going to come forward, and he is going to set himself up in opposition to God, and he is going to persecute anybody who is going to be a follower of God. This is being revealed to Daniel, but this is something that is also being revealed to us as well. That a time is coming, just like the Jews here under Antiochus, when it is going to be harder and harder to be a faithful follower of Jesus Christ. If you do, you are going to suffer. You are going to struggle. Now, I want to finish reading this chapter here. We'll just finish out the last few verses of it. And then I want to circle back and go back to the kind of people that we need to be. So let's go ahead and finish reading. At the end time, the king of the south will collide with him. And the king of the north will storm against him with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships. And he will enter countries, overflow them, and pass through. He will also enter the beautiful land. And many countries will fall, but these will be rescued out of his hand: Edom, Moab, and the foremost of the sons of Ammon. Then he will stretch out his hand against other countries, and the land of Egypt will not escape. But he will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his heels. But rumors from the east and from the north will disturb him, and he will go forth with great wrath to destroy and annihilate many. He will pitch his tents of his royal pavilion between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to an end, and no one will help him. God wins. In the end, God wins. The Antichrist, it could be Antiochus, any of the wicked who rise up, in the end, they're not going to survive. They're not going to make it. God is going to defeat them. Which side are you going to be on? Because it is going to be awfully hard while we endure the battle. It is going to be costly while we endure the battle. But in the end, whose side are you going to be on? Jesus said, those who endure to the end will be saved. It does not matter if you claim to follow Christ now. Are you going to continue to follow Christ all the way to the end? Because there's many people who claim to be followers of Christ, but they don't really have it in here. They're not really followers at a heart level. They might be part of the crowd, but they're not part of the family. Are you one of his, and are you going to stand? Now, I want to circle back on to those verses there where it talked about the kind of people that were going to rise up. This is verses 32 and 33. And it said that the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And it talks about those who have insight will give understanding to the many. These are the kind of people that we need to be. Those who have understanding and insight. How do you gain that? Because you know God. Because you know him. Now, in the scriptures, there's different levels of knowing. I could say that, oh yeah, I know you. Okay, it means I recognize your name, your face. Okay, we might have an acquaintance with each other. I could say that I know you. But I could say that I know my family, much more intimate. I know my wife. There's a closeness of knowledge. There's an experiential knowledge of doing life together, of being knit together into a covenant relationship. That is the kind of knowledge that we need if we are going to stand in a time like this. Because if you just know about God, it is not going to be enough to go through the fire and the persecution that is to come. If you just casually know about him, oh yeah, I sat in his house once a week. I was one who wore the team jacket. No, are you part of the team? Are you part of the family? Do you know him intimately, experientially, because you are one of his and you have been talking with him on a regular basis? Because he lives in your heart. Have you surrendered and dedicated your life to him? Those are the kind of people that are going to rise up and show themselves strong and take action. But that kind of relationship is not built overnight. It starts at a point in time when you come to a knowledge of your sin. I am a sinner before God. There is no way that I can please you, God. I am too filthy of a sinner. It doesn't matter if you sinned a whole bunch or just a little bit, you're still a sinner. And we come before him and say, God, save me. Not because I'm good enough, but because Jesus paid the price for me. He died the death that I deserved when he died on the cross. That should have been me hanging there. We come to him at a point in time and surrender and say, save me. And at that point, we're adopted into his family. But if that's all you have, you are not experiencing all God has for you. Because he wants you to walk in close communion with him daily in prayer, reading his scriptures, loving his family and being a part of it, interacting with each other, caring for those people who are on his heart, the poor, the widow, the orphan, that you are givers because of the fact that he has given to you for his kingdom. This is what it means to know God. To know him intimately, experientially. Walt, I'll invite you to come and prepare to lead us in our closing song. And as we do, I have a question for you. Do you know him? Do you know him? Do you know him truly? Now, you might know him as Savior. I came to him because I realized that I needed someone to save me from my sins. That is wonderful. That is a great place to start. If you do not know him as your Savior, if he has never forgiven you for your sins, if you've never come and confessed your sin to him and asked for his saving you, then please do so this morning. And when this song plays, I'll be down front. Just slip in beside me and say, that's what I need. I would love to introduce you to Jesus. But I know for many of you, you've already had that experience. You've already come to that point of recognition and given your life to him. But are you knowing him in an ongoing basis? Are you growing closer to him? Because there will come a time when casual knowledge of Jesus is not going to carry you through. You need to know him intimately if you are going to stand strong when the fire comes, when the sword comes, when they come and take away your home or your family, and they even want to take away your life. You need to know him intimately. Are you growing in your knowing? Take this time as we sing this final song to interact with the Lord and say, I want to know you more. Wherever you're at, I want to know you more. Now, I'll be down front. If you've got a particular burden on your heart for prayer, feel free to come forward. I'd be glad to pray with you. If you've never taken that first step of coming to him for the forgiveness of your sins, come forward as well, and I'd love to introduce you to him.